Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Kadkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Live Connections webinar with myself, Angela, and also Dr. Ray and Jean. But tonight we have a special guest, and the topic tonight is EMDR. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, because we will discuss it with Bethany Huron. She is a licensed professional counselor. EMDR is a certain mode of therapy that she specializes in, and she'll tell us all about it. We do encourage your participation, so please go ahead and comment and ask your questions, and we'll try to answer them live on the air. But for now, let me suggest that you all get into a comfortable place, try to limit the distractions and the noise around you so you can really focus on the topic. And here is Dr. Ray and Jean.
Oh, hey, Ange, how are you doing?
Let me fix that.
Ooh, we're little.
Do you know what today is?
Yeah, Ange, you know what date it is?
Yes, but do you want to tell me?
It is May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. And you know what?
Thank you.
Do you remember what we were doing a year ago?
No.
No? I'll give you a little hint. This is what we were doing a year ago. On May the 4th, be with you.
Wow.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
The morning meditations. Day 76 of 30 days of morning meditation.
Funny.
Right? You know, it's amazing. A year has gone by, you know, and yes, here we are doing a different presentation.
Which actually really helped us learn how to do all this stuff.
Yes, actually, yeah, it really did, especially different cameras. Yeah.
So now I think it would be great for us to add in our guest tonight. So I'll remove myself while you go ahead and introduce our guest.
Okay.
Awesome. Yes, we want to welcome Bethany Duran to our webinar this evening. We will be talking about the topic of EMDR.
You know,
Hello,
if you were
everybody.
on the
Hi.
if you were on the Couple Synergy Weekend Intensive, you know that we work with a lot of different tools, and we try to address things that will not just speak to us intellectually or behaviorally, but also from that emotional place, the place of feeling and the place of being. And EMDR is one of those really cool tools that a lot of people that have a difficult time having access to their emotions can use this as a tool to access that. So welcome, Bethany.
Thank you for having me tonight, guys.
What does EMDR stand for?
It stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's kind of a mouthful.
Yeah, that's a huge sentence.
So we'll just use EMDR.
Let's use EMDR. And EMDR has got, you know, kind of a really big trend happening in the psychology field, right? And we're really lucky to have Bethany, you know, as a clinician at the Lighthouse, working with people using and utilizing EMDR.
Yeah.
So maybe we can kind of give just an overall view of what EMDR is.
So, I mean, eye movements, right? So we're following fingers. It's all about bilateral. So bilateral is just like tapping, and it's through the tapping or the squeezing, just bilateral movement. It could be moving your fingers, following with your eyes with the fingers. It's accessing part of the brain that we don't talk in. Our memories we talk in the left brain, right? And trauma is stored in our right brain. So to access some of the harder places, if you add bilateral, it's actually opening up and loosening some of the stuck memories.
Can you talk about why did you decide to study EMDR? How'd you get into this?
Yeah, so I actually did some EMDR in my own life, and I thought it was really quite cool, just to see how, being stuck in some different places throughout life, and talk therapy wasn't really getting me there, and so I did EMDR. And then I love Bessel van der Kolk, who's a trauma specialist, and I think, he wrote the book The Body Keeps the Score, and he talked a lot about EMDR in there and just how it really opens up and kind of releases some of the stuck beliefs or ways that you're living, kind of changing the negative pathway that your brain's on, and desensitizing really some core beliefs that you might have. So I just thought it would be a really cool avenue to have in my own, private practice work with clients, to be able to have something else besides just conventional talk therapy.
It really reminds me of some of the components of hypnosis. Like when you were describing this bilateral thing, I always think about they always show the watch, which, your eyes are following to help you go into, that kind of place. Can you talk about, do you notice a difference between doing this work with children who have less brain development than adults? And how have you seen the difference working with kids or adults?
Yeah, so with kids, it's a lot more artwork, right? Where we'll make a square of paper into 4 squares. We might draw a memory, and then I'm going to have them kind of erase it by coloring through it. And then kind of seeing what comes up in the next picture. So let's say, a dog got hit by a car. That was really sad, right? We're going to draw that experience out. We're going to scribble it out. And then whatever comes up next, they're going to draw out. So it's a less of the verbal processing, right? With the adults, it's more of the tapping, or I have little buzzers that tap in your hand. So with your kids, it's more like experiential.
Which makes a lot of sense, because that part of their brain is developed and is storing those kind of memories. Right. It's the same part of the adult brain. Those memories are just a lot older and have a lot more thoughts on top of them.
And I think they hide a lot better, right? Because there's a lot of time involved and a lot of different thoughts and memories that get stored, And, we talk a lot about, these emotional wounds that people collect and store throughout their lives. And when they get into a committed partnership, into a relationship, these wounds, they are bound to come to the surface, and so now a couple is kind of facing a lot of these old memories and maybe past traumas that are now being played out in their relationship, and so I imagine this is where EMDR can be very helpful, for a couple trying to process those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. The rule of the 85-15, right? What actually is going on right now is maybe only 15%, and 85% is about the past. And so maybe you come home and the shoe's in the living room, and that triggers you and sends you off into a spiral, right? And it's really not about the shoe, but it's about all the past times that maybe they didn't listen, or someone didn't validate you, or someone didn't kind of follow what you asked for, right? And so it becomes this big eruption, and it's really not about the shoe, obviously, right? And so, through kind of working through some of those traumas or memories, obviously it's going to be pretty deep rooted, of maybe feeling invalidated, or nobody cares, or nobody listens, and so EMDR can really work at desensitizing those negative beliefs.
When you talk about, I'm just remembering, being in basic training, and they teach you to not emote, and they teach you to not move and not emote. So you're in formation, you have to stand there for long periods of time, and you have to, it's almost like you have to stop your fight, flight, or freeze response, so that you don't overreact if you're in a place of danger, which I think compounds when you are in that place and you're not reacting properly, and then you come back and have some PTSD or something like that. Have you noticed anything, or have you read anything about, people who've lived in those environments? And a lot of kids live like that, where if they have aggressive or angry parents, they're sort of trapped there and they can't
Yeah.
really do anything, and they just sort of freeze.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we look at adding in this integration of positive beliefs, right? When we think of reprocessing and EMDR, we're trying to change the way of the negative belief of, adults are unsafe, maybe if they had an abusive parent, then we're going to look at this positive side of adults can be safe, and looking at in their life where that's been possible, or looking to the future, how can I make this true in my life going forward, right? So sometimes we can't change the fact that a kid thinks that all adults are scary or mean, or unsafe, because that could be really true. But then we're going to see if we can strengthen this other side of how can we process that people can be safe. Does that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, that makes tons of sense.
Yeah.
We've talked in the past about the difference in men and women, the male and female brain, and how we process information very differently. Whereas men, we have to switch from one hemisphere of the brain to the other, depending on what we're thinking about or what we're focusing on, versus women can use both hemispheres of the brain simultaneously. I was wondering if there's anything in the research of EMDR that addresses that difference.
I'm not off the top of my head. I can't think of anything, to be honest. I know that some men like this because it's very fast paced and it's not a lot of processing, is what I was kind of taught in training. It's kind of what's coming up for you. It's not a lot of talk. And so sometimes men will like that better.
Wait, men don't like to talk about their feelings?
Right.
So
Well,
it's much more logical and intellectual,
Yeah.
right?
Right. So sometimes people have come into EMDR and they're like, well, you're not being very empathetic. And, it's more about what's coming up for you now after we do some tapping. Okay, I want you to follow that thought or that emotion or that image. And so it's not a lot of processing. So people that like to process and talk will be like, wait a minute, like you're not hearing me, and it's kind of this faster paced, very concrete, like moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, that you just talked about, he talks about this this couple, and this couple was in a like 80 car pileup, and they were like the 13th car, and this, they're trapped in their car, and they see this semi truck fly over their car, and they see a woman trapped in a car, and the car's on fire, and they physically weren't hurt, but then afterwards they weren't sleeping, they were very anxious, they were very on edge, and they went in to try to get some help, and they scanned their brains, and they noticed that in the man's brain, his frontal cortex was lit up, and they knew that he was processing it intellectually, and the recommendation then was to do some talk therapy to try to reframe it and stuff like that. But the woman, hers was all in the back of her brain, so she was stuck. She was in the freeze. She was frozen. And when they asked her about her history, she had said that her father died when she was 7, and her mom would just berate her, and she would just sort of stand there and take it. And they said, she's not even grounded enough in her body to try to do talk therapy. So she needs something that is much more going to access that lizard part of our brain that's in that freeze. And EMDR is part of accessing that.
Yeah.
So how would you know if you need EMDR? What are some of the things people should look for?
I think if you've done traditional talk therapy and you're just really at a wall, and you've tried the cognitive behavioral, you've tried solution focused, you've tried DBT, and you've tried all these things and you're just not making any headway, right? It's time to maybe try something different, especially if you have a lot of negative self-talk, right? I'm a bad person. I'm not good enough. Nobody loves me. I'm abandoned. Some of those very formative thing, the survival instincts, any of that really gets stuck. How can you move past it and think that you're a good person if all day, every day, you're telling yourself, I'm not good enough, I'm not good, I'm a bad person, I'm unlovable? It's hard to then have the foundation to move up.
And you know what? This is great conversation, and we do have lots of comments and questions coming in. So is it okay if we take one of them?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay. So here's one for you, Bethany.
Oh, I've done this with Bethany. Highly, highly recommend. Amazing how much it does and how well it works. Thanks, Bethany. That's a great little testimony there.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Dave,
Thanks, Dave.
David, would it be okay if we shared a little bit of your story, not details or anything, but just, a little bit of the process? And we'll wait for your response before we talk more about that. And you could ask, is there another comment or question that you want to
Yes,
okay.
There is. So this is a long one. Good question. I'll read this. My daughter was adopted from China at the age of 8 months. I often hear things about things that happened in her first 8 months of life and how they could affect her as an adult. The question is, Bethany, does EMDR work with things before you are old enough to even know what happened?
Oh, that's a good question.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I did my training, they were talking about how some kids have been maybe hospitalized or have a lot of maybe a heart condition or were born really early, and they have this anxiety that's just in their body that they don't have words for it, right? Because they were babies in the NICU. And so things that happen to even babies in their first 8 months of life or even into utero can impact you to this day, right? And we don't have the language for it. And so it's trapped in our body. Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, right? Our bodies, maybe a hug feels trapping to somebody that's had cords in them as babies. So yes, definitely things that happen prior to being able to verbalize, EMDR can help.
Yeah, that's amazing how impacted we are by everything. I mean, if you do an ultrasound, you can see the startle response from a baby. Yeah. And that means that part of your brain's already recording.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the majority of memories that are stored as a child are emotional in nature. They don't have words to connect to them. And so you might have something coming up or feelings that are coming up that you're not able to connect to a cognitive thought about. So I can see how, absolutely, EMDR, without using words, right? It is able to help people access that pain and be able to process it.
Yeah, we knew a man that he was placed for adoption within the first couple of weeks of his life, but he wasn't adopted until 9 months, and he doesn't know what happened in between that. And that was always, a thing that he thought was the precursor of a lot of the stuff he was trying to respond to as an adult. So that's interesting. So Dave said, yes, we can talk about his story a little bit. And so, one of the things with Dave is he was having a lot of physiological responses, things with panic attacks or even digestive stuff that he knew was kind of connected to something, but he really couldn't access it. And he tried getting help from the medical community because it felt like everything was in his body. And the work that you did with him, because I got to see the before and the afters, was pretty incredible. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So Dave came in and, we kind of did our groundwork of laying some foundational work. And I remember after one of his first sessions, he said, I almost left because this was intense, right? And so that is one experience that will happen. But I remember after a few sessions, he came back and said, I had this triggering experience at work, and this negative belief that we worked on wasn't true anymore.
And it became more automatic to not have that old programming and to just have this new thing that's coming up. And when you do that in an intellectual place, from a place of talking and thinking or positive affirmations, it doesn't quite sink in to the depth of our brain where the trauma is and where those original experiences are from. And so, that's why doing things like EMDR is going to heal you at such a different place. Because it's not logical, it's not rational, it's not even something that is conscious.
Right. And so by doing the desensitizing work, we're making that less and less true. And then we're going to reprocess this positive belief and we're going to make that more and more true.
So we found it to be extremely helpful as a supplement to talk therapy as well.
Mm-hmm. And I see several of the clinicians will send their clients. I have, clients that see therapists in different settings, and they kind of recommend EMDR. So it's a supplement. And then with clients that are my client, I can kind of integrate it in and out.
That's fantastic. Are there cases where EMDR is probably like contraindicated? Where there probably is not a good idea, for you to engage in EMDR therapy?
I think it's more about sometimes checking in. Like if someone comes in and they're so dysregulated, I'm not going to go to a trauma response, right? We're going to do more first aid in the moment of how can we use like a safe space or some grounding techniques to kind of get back into your body, be able to tolerate the distress, and then work on the traumas or the negative emotions when you're more regulated. There's different techniques and tools. Like, let's say I went to a fire at a school. There's different like first aid type interventions you can use in those moments that target different things. But, usually I'll start off like, are you feeling safe? Are you connected to your body right now? But other than that, there's not a ton of, information that I was taught that says like no EMDR. It can be used for substances. It can be used for depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD.
Would it be useful for parents with children who have emotionally dysregulation problems? Maybe they have sensory issues or ADHD or something like that they could come in and learn some ways that they could show up and be there for their children beyond the talking aspect that they might be able to do, but to really hold that space when they're kind of in their freak out place.
Yeah, I think some of the groundwork of how can we use a safe space, right? Using some imagery to kind of reground yourself. There's also what we call taxing the working memory, where like if your brain's going like this, how can we interrupt it? So I suggest counting as fast as you can to 1 to 10 and backwards, doing the alphabet as fast as you can, naming as many colors, whatever kind of interests the kids or the adult to kind of interrupt the dysregulation, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking, I'm so mad, I need to punch somebody. Okay, like I want you to count as fast as you can to 100.
It kind of reminds me of like someone that's fallen in the water and they're like, help, I can't swim. And you're just like, stand up. And they're only in like a foot of water.
Right.
And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very important to point out that, a lot of the work that we do, is very in depth, right? We get to a lot of, wounds that people have been carrying with them throughout their entire life. And, you can only do so much with words, mm-hmm. And EMDR is another way, a supplement, to be able to access, that pain, be able to kind of maybe gain control of it, I would say, right? And to help you start to process it in a way that it can come up for healing, and between a couple, that is absolutely essential in order for a couple to actually get to that next stage in their relationship, right?
Yeah, especially if they're not able to communicate. If they're in sort of a stalemate where as soon as a conflict comes up, they're so conflict avoidant and they just don't want to go there. They don't want to feel anything. They don't want to open anything up because it feels like unsafe and scary. So it's probably more behavioral that you're going to notice if your partner's doing that or if you're doing that. And inside, you're bubbling, something's coming up, but on the outside, you look like, what's the problem? I don't want to talk about that. It's not a big deal. I'll just learn to, what did you say? Put the shoes in the right spot, and then we
Yeah.
won't have the problem anymore, right? And
Yeah.
of course, it doesn't solve the problem.
I really like that you brought that up, about it's not about the shoe, right? Because, for a lot of people out there that are not that experienced in working with, people that may have traumas, it's not as easy to just say, let's use I statements or let's just express ourselves, in a very assertive manner. Because when we're talking about these really deep-seated emotional issues, right? Emotional, activators, I should say, that we are carrying around with us. If you are not able to recognize that this is something that can come up for somebody, it can be very detrimental, right? And so, being able to have EMDR as a tool in your toolbox, to be able to recognize that maybe this is okay for somebody, but not okay for another person, I think that's really important for providers out there and people that are doing this work.
Yeah, a lot of times when, and we mostly work with adults, we don't really work with children anymore, but parents will be like, we're going through a divorce. Does my kid need therapy? Or they maybe a friend moved away and they're going through a loss, whatever kind of things that kids go through. And so what we're typically telling them to look for is, this child's not going to come up to you and be like, so mom, I just wanted to share with you that I'm feeling very sad that, Johnny moved away. They're not going to even have that conscious awareness. What they're going to do is fail a test or change their eating patterns or their sleeping patterns, or their energy is going to shift in some way, or they're going to be very irritable. And, the truth is adults are no different. Adults are going to show it from that type of place as well. And that's what I would call like emotions coming out sideways, that they're not really getting processed, but there is something in there. And, we use the word trauma and people will say, well, I can't really think of anything that's ever really happened to me. And it's an interesting thing because it's more about our perception of things that even could have happened rather than maybe actually happened, including if you have a parent that's gone through something and then they parent you in a way that says, don't do this thing, it's very dangerous. And you're like, what's the danger? And so I would think those are some of the indications that EMDR would be a useful tool to come in and learn more about yourself. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely when our body is having some sort of response, right? And I mean, your gut can have a response, your brain can have a response, you can have this fight, flight, freeze response. It's really important to pay attention to it and kind of honor where you're at viscerally, right? And like what's going on physiologically for you, and to not ignore those symptoms.
One of the things that you shared with us, and I want you to talk more about this, is, everyone talks about fight, flight, or freeze, but you shared a fourth category, fawn. Can you talk about what fawn is?
Yeah, off the top of my head, it's been a little bit. That's more of the trauma response, I think.
That's like a people pleaser. That's where our codependencies come from. And if you think about it, if you're in a situation that feels scary, like you have a really, really angry parent, you're going to be very concerned about making them happy.
Right.
And then you bring that into your adult relationships, but that's actually a response to trauma.
Yeah. Right. Trying to keep the peace, make everything okay. As long as everybody's quiet, nothing's wrong's going to happen, you know?
And that's what it would feel like in your body.
And also the fawn has that tendency to be overwhelmed, and because of all this people pleasing, they tend to have a lack of identity, and not a very strong sense of themselves.
I would imagine that a great fear of abandonment as well.
Yeah.
That if this person leaves me, then I don't know who I am. My identity becomes who I'm taking care of, and I'm not sure who I am without that person.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point, Ange.
I love how she just pops in and pops out.
It's a fun platform.
She's like a fairy. So, I was wondering, Bethany, when you were talking, what happens if, I would imagine this would happen pretty frequently, is that, someone is going through EMDR and it brings up a trauma, right? And all of a sudden, maybe a memory comes to mind that they didn't think about, that, it's just been lost and now it comes to mind. And now they're starting to have this trauma response. What happens then? What do you do then?
Yeah, so that happens a lot. Or someone will be like, oh my gosh, I just heard my grandma sneeze. Or I can smell the candle in the background, right? I'm back physically experiencing these senses that I forgot existed. And so you tend to them, right? There's different interventions and interweaves you can do throughout the EMDR. EMDR is pretty cut and regimented throughout the thing. But if someone has this response, I'm going to tend to it, right? I'm going to talk to them. We're going to process. We're going to do grounding. We make a container so we can put things in a compartment that are too hard, right? Because a lot of times in life, we shove things down, and we never take them out and deal with them again. But sometimes things are too big. So we make a compartment and they can put it in, and we close it up and we make it safe and we put it on the shelf for later. Or we use a safe space somewhere. Usually it's beach or the mountains or a grandparent's house that was safe, right? And we use these imageries and mindfulness. We reground ourselves to feel, safe in the moment and remind them you are safe now. That happened, and we validate and we talk about their experience, right?
You ever use a landfill and just throw it into the landfill? Deal with it later.
My dog's paw.
Yeah. Oh, is that his paw? I thought it was his tail.
Yeah. No, that's his paw.
So that's another benefit if you ever get to do a session with Bethany is she has a therapy dog in training, Champ, yes. And he's really a nice breath of fresh air. And again, if you think about animals, they don't have language. They don't speak. Right. And so they certainly communicate because you can teach them words and they understand you. Mm-hmm. But they are so incredibly tapped in emotionally. Mm-hmm. And they, like all of us, they regulate our biorhythms, and they can tell if you're upset or if you're calm and feel good. And so it's another layer of wonderful treatment is to have a little puppy there that is lovely to pet.
Yeah.
Oh, he just laid down.
He did.
So what would you say?
The other thing is if I'm working with a therapist and I see their client and they have a really big emotional thing, get in with your therapist this week and process what came up, so that we can make sure that we're safe. And EMDR is all about safety and containment. And every time before a session ends, when I'm wrapping up, are you feeling safe? Are you feeling contained? Where's your distress level? Do you feel safe leaving my office today? And that's something that
assessing that.
Yeah. So there's it's all self, right? Self. Mm-hmm. And so there's two scales. There's your subject units of distress units, which is a 0 to 10 scale. And so let's say someone's distress is at a 10 at the start. we don't want it to be a 10 when they leave, right? And if it is a 10, then we're going to do some grounding and some mindfulness, because, I can't say that this experience won't make you feel anxious or angry or sad, but can we at least make it tolerable? And then that top thing is your validity scale of how positive it feels on a scale of 1 to 7. So when we are reprocessing or putting in the positive, we look at the scale of 1 to 7. How true does it feel? We want to get it up to a 7. And then your negative, distressing, subject units of distress or SUDS, is 0 to 10. And usually people will say, this is my negative belief that I'm worthless. My emotions are angry, sad, anxious, and it's a 10. And then we want to really get it down to 0 or lower throughout the session.
And so you're assessing it throughout the session, or you're assessing it, every session that you see them?
Yeah, throughout the session. So we do bilateral sets, like I was saying, just the tapping or the eye movements. And I might say, what's your SUDS? 10. Okay, let's do a couple sets. What's your SUDS? 9. Okay, let's do a few more sets. Now it's an 8. Right, it's not going to go that fast, but it is throughout the whole session.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One thing that I always would joke about, that I wanted to write a book called Real Women Know How to Fall Apart. And, our body has this natural way of processing grief. And it really is grief at this stage, because it's happened so long ago, whatever the things are that come up. And in the book, The Journey by Brandon Bays, she says, an authentic emotion, it won't last for very long. And to treat it just like you would if you ate something toxic. Like if you ate something toxic and it came up and out, you wouldn't sift through it and figure it out and stuff it back down. You would let it go, and you would, and I would imagine that there may be those really healing moments after doing EMDR when stuff is just primed from an emotional place to really let it out through having a good hard cry or a good grief moment. But I think that's a little bit different than feeling unsafe, would you say?
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've had clients say you need to keep a tally of how many people you cry with EMDR, because it's very emotional and unlocking things that maybe you haven't accessed before, but it's so healing too.
Yeah. Which is the goal, is to get it up and out. Yeah. And that's one of our natural ways we do that. And after you have a good emote
Mm-hmm.
session,
Emoting,
a good emoting,
Modi.
It, to me, it sort of feels like just like a really good workout where you're kind of exhausted and your brain feels like flooded in like a soft, fluffy cloud. And that's just those endorphins that, again, it's nature's way of helping us soothe ourselves.
Yeah.
When we are, being kind and gentle with ourselves and allowing ourselves to feel again. And so it's all in there. It's all in there that, it's not just big, scary feelings that come up and you get stuck, but it's a whole process.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a thing with distress tolerance, kind of almost with EMDR too, where let's say you come in and you're just really anxious and you're saying, I'm a 10, I'm a 10, I'm a 10. There's nothing going on. We can target it by, I want you to give it a shape, a size, a texture, and then adding the tapping. And it's pretty incredible how by the end of the session, the shape that they've envisioned has changed and morphed and isn't so dense and hard. And so
would you say that if somebody was really unaware of their emotions, but were having interesting physiological problems, their knees hurt or their stomach hurts or something, would EMDR be useful in uncovering something that might be related to how your body is processing something?
Yeah, there's different interventions again for pain and like grief even. So yeah, there's definitely different protocols, as we say, like for each specific thing, right? There's things for phobias. There's protocols for phobias. If you have an intense fear of spiders, you know, we could make a protocol to work through that.
What would you say to someone who's just like, I don't want to go there? You know, that just seems too scary to unlock Pandora's box and let it all out, right?
Yeah. You know, and so I tell people that you're only going to unlock what you can in the moment. You know what I mean? Like what's going to come out needs to come out. It's kind of like trying to not cry when you need to cry or sneeze when you need to sneeze. It's like, okay, well, this is so uncomfortable that I just need to let it out. And I ask them, are you happy with the way you're living right now? Are you happy with your life? Are you content? You know, because we don't have to go there. And that's one of the things in therapy, right? Like we don't have to go there. But with EMDR, it's already in their body. It's already impacting the way that they're living and the way that they talk to themselves and view themselves, that, you know, it needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, and not dealing with it doesn't create the pain. It just locks it in there with you.
Right. And if you're in a relationship and you have all this trauma, you're going to keep creating this trauma in your current relationships, right? Whether it's romantic or not, or with a kid, whatever your relationship is with somebody, you're going to keep this trauma alive.
And unfortunately, like in the case of having a child, pass that on to them as well, which is the sad part that we see sometimes.
Right.
A lot of times I've noticed with people, especially with anxiety, that calming down actually brings them more anxiety. It's like they have a belief that their anxiety is protecting them. They're vigilant. And if I stay vigilant, then I stay safe.
Mm-hmm.
Would EMDR be helpful with people who have anxiety and they've tried everything and nothing works?
Yeah, we would definitely look at like that control, right? I have to be in control. Well, why? And then looking at kind of where has that worked for you in the past and where has it not worked for you, and what would it be like to let go? So definitely like a lot of anxiety. I've worked with someone that has a lot of OCD, right? And that's all about control and keeping things safe. And
yeah, those perfectionists out there that don't realize that that's a form of anxiety.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Oh, it's very interesting when you talk about the tapping, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems so elementary, right? Like what is the tapping going to do, But, like I understand that, you have the left side of the body is controlled by the right hemisphere of the brain, right side of the body is controlled by the left hemisphere of the brain. But maybe you can talk a little bit about, what this actually is doing in the brain.
So it's the brain's natural healing process is the easiest way to describe it. The person that came up with EMDR, she noticed she was really distressed and she was walking through a park and she was darting her eyes back and forth, and she noticed the level of distress go down. And so then she started experimenting with it, basically, right? Like, okay, like let me bring up this distressing image, move my eyes back and forth, do some bilateral. Oh my gosh, that worked, right? And so through that, they've just kind of learned that it accesses and kind of unsticks what's stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And then through the, years, they learned that tapping and through virtual therapy, right? Because a lot of times people would be doing this in their session. But this is kind of hard to follow on a computer screen without getting dizzy, so through kind of COVID, actually, we've learned how much you can do this. You can get stress balls, and we've learned that it's really just about the bilateral. And so even if you're stressed at home, like doing like a few passes like this can really kind of calm your system down.
Yeah, I think I've had people describe that it seems silly and what's the point? and then they have the experience of it, and they're like, who knew? Who knew it would actually impact me that much to do something that looks kind of, simplistic or weird or even childlike. This has been really awesome content. And if you have any questions, we just want to invite everyone to the Lighthouse Emotional Wellness Center is having our ribbon tying open house
ribbon tying on May 22nd. We are, we moved back into Arlington Heights during lockdown. So this is our long awaited celebration of our move back. And this is going to be a really wonderful celebration. It's a kind of like a celebration of, resilience and getting through, the pandemic and being able to continue to provide services for, the Chicagoland area and beyond, and having such a great team.
Yeah.
Right.
Get to know all the other therapists that work for the Lighthouse.
Right.
So that's at 3205 North Wilkie Road in North Arlington Heights.
Yeah, we'll have tents outside. It's COVID friendly. I shouldn't say COVID friendly.
Do some indoor tours that are limited.
Right. And so the mayor of Arlington Heights will be doing the ribbon tying ceremony at 12:30, and everyone is welcome to stop by and say hi.
So, Ange, is this a good time for some meditation, or do we have some more questions?
No, this is a perfect time. And, thank you to everyone who asked a question and commented and for sharing a little bit about your experience of EMDR. And Bethany, it's just been such a treat to have you here with all this great knowledge. So I think it's perfect to wrap it up with a meditation.
Cool.
Yeah, and if you want to do any work with Bethany, you can just go on
lighthouseemotionalwellness.com.
Email or call over there, and they can. Most of this work is covered through insurance as well, and so it's really a relief. And I also like that EMDR is fairly short. I would say I've seen you work with people for 6-8 times, and it really made a huge impact in their life.
Yeah.
It's not one time, though, you guys. It's not just one time.
What? It's not a magic bullet? Magic? No.
So, do you want to stay on the screen while we meditate? Or you want to
we'll
go?
pull it off. It's going to be just you.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going.
Let's go.
Okay.
All right. So get into a comfortable position. And we're not going to close our eyes today.
Ooh.
So just allow yourself to focus on your breath and let your eyes go to a comfortable spot on the floor. And try to imagine where the visual image goes through your eyes and deep into the back part of your brain. And with your next inhalation, just very slowly move your eyes as far to the left as you can. And hold it there for a couple of breaths. And just be aware of what's happening between what you're seeing and what your brain is perceiving. And with your next inhalation, move your eyes very slowly all the way to the right. And pick a spot that you can see that's all the way to the right. And just gently focus there as you notice how that image is being processed deep in your brain. And with your next inhalation, move your attention all the way back over to the left. And exhale and back to the right. And if you choose, you can gently close your eyes, or you can leave them open. And just allow your eyes, with the movement of your breath, to go to the left, to the right, back, and forth. And just be aware of the impact that it has deep in your brain. Don't worry about words, thoughts, or even feelings. Just be aware of the sensation. Notice if your eyes want to move faster or slower. And allow your eyes to do what they want. Even if they want to find a comfortable place to rest for a moment. Just observe without judgment. And then with your next exhalation, bring your eyes back to the center. And now allow your gaze to go from the floor to the ceiling. And again, you can do this with your eyes open or closed. And notice any difference between moving your eyes up and down from what you experienced when they were moving from left to right. And with your next exhalation, allow your eyes to find the center again. And focus on your breath. And just be aware of what you're experiencing in your physical body, in your thoughts, in your emotions, and in your beingness. And if you closed your eyes, just allow them to gently open as you gaze at the floor. And just be aware of what it feels like to have your eyes cast down. And when you're ready, gently bring your eyes back to center. And just notice what you feel. And again, we really want to thank Bethany. This work that she's doing is really powerful and really beneficial. And the more people we can make aware of it, it's always a good thing to share that. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, if you want any more information about EMDR, or want to come to the open house, just
we'd love to see you in person.
Look us up online, awesome. LighthouseEmotionalWellness.com. And
until next time,
synergize your life and synergize your love.
Have a great week.